The city was a prisoner to the storm that night, caught in the grip of a tempest that seemed to have no end. Rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against rooftops and flooding the streets until they gleamed like dark mirrors under the stuttering glow of streetlights. The wind tore through the urban landscape, rattling windows and bending trees until their branches clawed at the sky. It was the kind of night that drove people indoors, leaving the world outside to the mercy of the elements. But Malik Thomas was not one to retreat. Hunched behind the wheel of his weathered yellow taxi, he navigated the chaos, his tired eyes scanning the empty streets for any sign of life. The cab's engine growled faintly, a tired beast that had seen too many miles, its faded paint chipped from years of service. Malik was a man shaped by time and trial. At 43, his face bore the lines of a life spent working, dark skin weathered by sun and wind, hands roughened by years of gripping the steering wheel. His short-cropped hair was flecked with gray, a quiet testament to the burdens he carried. 3 years ago, he had buried his wife, Kenya, after a swift and merciless illness stole her away. Now, he raised their children. Darius, a lanky 13-year-old with dreams too big for their small apartment, and Nia, 9, with her shy smile and boundless curiosity, alone. The wedding band he once wore sat in a drawer at home, a silent relic he couldn't bear to part with. Malik drove through the nights to keep the lights on, to put food on the table, to give his kids a chance at something better. But tonight, the fares were scarce, and the weight of unpaid bills pressed against his chest like the storm pressing against the city. The rain lashed the windshield as he turned onto a wide, deserted avenue, the wipers slashing back and forth in a losing battle against the deluge. That's when he saw him, a solitary figure standing at the curb, drenched and shivering beneath a flickering street lamp. The man was young, perhaps in his late 20s, his thin frame hunched against the wind. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper in one hand, waving frantically with the other, his soaked clothes clinging to him like a second skin. His dark hair plastered to his forehead, and his eyes, wide and pleading, caught the faint glow of Malik's headlights. Malik slowed, peering through the rain-streaked glass. He knew the unwritten rules of the trade. Late-night stragglers with no cash were a risk not worth taking. Over the crackling dispatch radio, he'd heard other drivers grumble about freeloaders and sob stories. 3 cabs had already roared past, their taillights vanishing into the storm without a second glance. But something in the man's posture, the way he stood, vulnerable yet defiant, tugged at Malik. He flicked on his blinker and eased the cab to a stop. The stranger yanked the door open, a gust of wind carrying the scent of rain and desperation into the cab. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice raw from the cold. I don't have any money. I've got a job interview across town. If I don't make it—" His words faltered, swallowed by the storm's roar. Malik studied him, the drenched resume trembling in his grip, the cheap suit sagging under the weight of water, the quiet dignity warring with despair in his eyes. Without a word, Malik nodded toward the back seat. "Get in," he said, his voice low but firm, "before you catch your death out there." The man hesitated, blinking through the rain dripping from his lashes. "But I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for money," Malik replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Get in." The stranger slid into the cab, water pooling on the cracked vinyl seat as he shut the door. Malik cranked the heater, the faint warmth cutting through the damp chill. "What's your name?" he asked, glancing at his passenger in the rear-view mirror. "Ethan," the man replied, clutching the soggy resume to his chest as if it were a lifeline. "Ethan Carter." Malik gave a small nod and pulled back onto the road, the cab's tires hissing against the wet pavement. For a while, they rode in silence, the storm's rhythm filling the space between them. Malik didn't push for conversation. He'd driven enough passengers to know when silence was a mercy. But as they crossed the city, weaving through flooded intersections and past darkened storefronts, Ethan's voice broke through the quiet, soft and halting. "I used to have it together," he said, staring out at the blurred lights beyond the window. "Had a decent job, marketing assistant. Nice apartment. Then the company downsized, and I was out. 1 bad month turned into 6, and now—" He trailed off, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Now I'm begging for rides in the rain, hoping some stranger doesn't leave me stranded." Malik grunted, a sound of recognition rather than judgment. Life's got a way of stacking the deck against you, he said, his eyes fixed on the road. But you're still here, still fighting. That counts. Ethan turned to him, his gaze searching. You think one chance can really change things? Malik shrugged, his hands steady on the wheel. Seen it happen. Sometimes all it takes is one break, one person who says yes when everyone else says no. They pulled up to a squat, gray office building, its windows dark and uninviting against the storm's fury. Ethan gripped the door handle, hesitating. Thank you, he said again, his voice thick with gratitude. I won't forget this. Malik met his eyes in the mirror and gave a curt nod. Go get what's yours, he said, jerking his thumb toward the building. Ethan managed a shaky smile, then stepped out, disappearing into the rain as the door thudded shut. Malik watched him go, the figure swallowed by the downpour, then shifted the cab into gear and drove off. It was just another fare, or so he thought. A small act of kindness lost to the city's endless churn. He had no inkling it would circle back to him. Weeks slipped by, each day a blur of grinding shifts and quiet struggles. The cab's transmission began to falter, groaning with every turn, and the gas gauge hovered near empty too often. Nia needed new shoes, her sneakers were splitting at the soles, and Darius had his eye on a laptop for school, a dream Malik couldn't touch. Some nights, after the kids were asleep, he sat in the parked cab, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, the weight of it all threatening to crush him. But he kept going, because that's what he did, kept going. Then, one gray morning after a brutal all-nighter, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio, sharp and unexpected. Malik, you there? Got a call. Someone asked for you by name. Malik rubbed his bleary eyes, frowning. You sure? Yeah, said you gave him a ride a few weeks back. Left an address. Sounds like it's worth your time. Curiosity stirred through the fog of exhaustion. Malik jotted down the details and drove to a sleek downtown district, where glass towers rose like giants over the streets. His battered cab looked like an intruder among the polished cars lining the curb. Stepping into the pristine lobby, he felt the weight of stairs, his damp shirt, his scuffed boots, his calloused hands a stark contrast to the polished marble and tailored suits. Then, striding toward him with a warm, confident smile, was Ethan, unrecognizable yet familiar. The soaked stranger was gone. In his place stood a man in a crisp suit, his posture tall, his eyes bright with purpose. Malik, Ethan said, extending a hand. I've been hoping to see you again. They shook hands, Malik's rough grip meeting Ethan's steady one. Didn't expect this, Malik said, still piecing together the transformation. Ethan laughed, a little sheepish. Neither did I. But I never forgot that night. He gestured toward a quiet corner of the coffee lounge, and they Saturday, I got the job, Ethan explained, his voice earnest. Made it to the interview just in time, thanks to you. Started at the bottom, but I worked hard. A few weeks ago, they promoted me, Director of Outreach. Malik nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. That's good, man. Real good. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. I kept asking myself, how do you thank a man who helped you when you had nothing to give back? Before Malik could brush it off, Ethan slid a folder across the table. I don't want to just say it. I want to show it. Malik opened the folder and stared. A job offer. Fleet supervisor for the company's transportation division. Full salary, benefits, paid vacation, health insurance for him and the kids. It was more than he'd dared to hope for. A lifeline dangled in front of a man who'd spent years treading water. I talked to HR, Ethan said quietly. It's yours if you want it. Malik's throat tightened, a swell of emotion catching him off guard. He thought of Darius, bent over a borrowed laptop, and Nia, asking shyly about soccer tryouts. He thought of the nights he'd driven through hunger and exhaustion, praying for a way out. Thank you, he managed, his voice rough with feeling. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that comes from knowing the road it took to get here. Thank you, for being the man you are. Malik took the job, and soon, the pieces of his life began to shift. The bills shrank, Nia got her cleats, and Darius carried a new laptop with quiet pride. Their small apartment filled with laughter again, the weight lifting from rooms that had grown too still. Malik still drove sometimes, not for fares, but with his kids in the back, windows down, their voices rising over the hum of the engine. It wasn't riches, but it was enough. Stability, hope, a future. All because, on a stormy night, he'd stopped for a stranger, offering kindness without expecting a return. And in the quiet way life turns, that kindness had come full circle, lighting the path ahead.